So could you get condylar degeneration and disc derangement by doing that? Heck yeah, that's a great way. I don't know of a better way. That's a great way to do it. You don't even have to get in a car accident.
Which joint would be deranged from this problem? The left one or the right one?
If you watch that lateral pole right there, you have the animation in this slide series. I have another animation, by the way. It shows the mandible from behind. And it shows this activity. If you can look at a mandible this way, and there's a lateral pterygoid that goes like this, and it shows the mandible going, and that there's a contact on this side. And I show everyone, look at this thing move this way. And then I have them look at the other side. This condyle rotates backwards as this one goes forwards. This doesn't show it quite well, but there's a great way to sort of, quote, distalize this condyle during this act. So take your pick. One side can be deranged and strained and loaded. The other one can be distalized and punching backwards in the retrodiscal tissue. There's all kinds of really cool ways to mess with your joints by doing stuff like this. This is just the first example. I have 2 or 3 more occluding schemes where the force vectors are going to change, and then you get more things happening.
So you don't necessarily know which side it's going to be. Is that what you're saying?
This is just an example of the working side interference. What's so bad about a working side interference? This. When you have an excursive movement, didn't we sort of hope you had canine rise right there? That's why you would do that adjustment, because you wanted to get canine rise. It's not when you're chewing food. It's when you're trying to get out of the clenching position. The anterior temporalis is still contracting somewhat to maintain occluding. So if you would just grind, well, Jim, you moron, just grind the big palatal cusp of that thing and get rid of that interference and get back to canine rise. Where will the force vector aim? Towards the canine. Does the canine care? No. If you get to canine edge-to-edge contact, you're back to a clench fest. But at least it's better than the unilateral posterior contact. Why is that so bad? It's a great way to wipe out your other joint, the opposite side. It's a great way. Did you know that a muscle gets shorter, but it's a relative look? Because if this is a pterygoid plate of the sphenoid bone and this is a condyle and I'm a lateral pterygoid, the muscle gets shorter this way. The middle of the muscle holds still and it goes like this. Unless one side is stable, it's all relative. It's all relative. The muscle thinks it's doing this because it is. It just happens to be this is mobile, so it moves that way. If nothing can move, it's pulling on the pterygoid plate of the sphenoid bone as much as it is on the condyle. Some people get facial pressure. When you start to talk about what are the signs and symptoms of TMD, and Barry showed an umbrella over here with a bunch of stuff under the umbrella. Where do they come from? Here's a great way to put reverse strain on the pterygoid plate of your sphenoid bone. It's about the thickness of a potato chip. It never, ever, ever gets pulled on with any sort of force isometrically. Why? Because things are moving. How hard is it to open your jaw? There's no real force or strain there unless things can't move. Depending on the degree of contraction intensity is how much soreness or tenderness that you'll have. What a great way to crush your tooth into its own socket. If someone says, I've got a toothache, and they point like this, it's somewhere. You love the patient. I got a toothache right here, and when I tie it, you go, whew, we're getting close. But when they say, I've got that toothache again, and you take the x-ray and you look at it, and you don't see anything, and you go, didn't you have a toothache 6 months ago? And you look in the chart, and it was on the other side, and they pick out new targets and crush them into their sockets. And they have recurring toothaches. You can't figure out where, and it's root canal, this tooth is. So when you start to look at the signs and symptoms of TMD, there's a whole bunch of them right there. So when Barry takes the nature portion of diagnosis, and diagnosis is the nature and cause of a disease and injury. Here's all the nature of signs of the presentation. And the cause is a function of how often, how long, and how intense, and where's your jaw during the act. When you have an idea of both, you're going to start to win this game because you know your enemy and you know exactly what he can do and how he's going to do it. So our goal is to identify both the nature and cause of this temporomandibular disorder. So here's this, I call this now contralateral strain. You look at this one joint, there's the contralateral contact, and that's how you would strain that joint. Here's the same jaw position. We've got one condyle more, one's translated a bit, but the resisting contact is on the same side. So when you translate this condyle a little bit and then hook up the circuitry on the same side and you really can start to squeeze, you've got the temporalis elevating, you've got the superior head of lateral pterygoid contracting because it contracts in concert with the elevator, and since this condyle has been translated, that's because the lateral inferior head translated it. All three of those guys are contracting at the same time. That's another great way to crush stuff. I wouldn't want to be in there during that event. Here's somebody that they used to have a posterior contact like this, and so it was ground down, so now we've got these canines are flat on top of each other. Now there's a canine clench fest on that side. And when you reduce these when you reduce contacts on one side, something else is going to start to touch. There's the other side. Can you see it in there? There's a posterior contact on the opposite side during that event. So now we've got, there's a canine, I think it'll freeze. There's canine flat to flat. So I know this person has a habit of clenching off to the right. While that posterior, those two teeth are contacting at the same time. You've got circuitry going on both sides. One condyle has been rotated back in and one's been translated out. That's what a train wreck that is. Now, it's not going to be difficult to treat that if all you could do was occlusal equilibrations. You'd say, well, I know this. I can buzz those things back there and shut down the circuitry to this side. The only bummer is if those canines are kind of flat, my opponent has already been rehearsing to beat me already. And there's the evidence. I'm going to get killed on this if I don't acknowledge that canine to canine. Now here's the basics of these parafunctional occluding schemes. Primary clenching, and if someone is a perfect primary clencher, they have 0 joint strain and 0 tooth wear. They don't tell you anything about from here down. And on the spectrum, the continuum of parafunction, if you've got a mandible and a maxilla, and the mandible's moving like this and nothing's touching, who cares? There's 0 signs and symptoms. There's 0 signs and no symptoms. As you elevate a little bit more, elevate a little bit more, now they're gently rubbing on each other. Let's elevate more intensely. Now they're hard rubbing. Let's elevate more. Now they're moving. Let's elevate really hard. I can't move it at all. So right here, there's no signs and huge symptoms for a headache sufferer. No signs. No signs. Does this person tell you about their headache and migraine if their teeth look great and their joints are fine? Nope. Why would you ask them? That's none of your business. If you're over here where it's here, you got a couple of teeth that are sore and joints that are really strained. Over here, you have some teeth that are worn and you feel fabulous. Truck drivers have some pretty gnarly worn teeth. You must have headaches and migraine. Nope. How could that possibly be? If your teeth are really, really, really flat, are you squeezing very hard? Because you've got to really move around. Plus, I think those guys have some GERD going. A great way to wear down teeth is to blow some acid in there and then rub on them.